Hello and welcome to today's video dealing with health and wellness and sometimes issues related to cosmology and just general personal development. Today's video is a bit of a personal one. I wanted to share my experience with using the keto diet. Now, you may be aware of it or you may not be aware of it. You may be using it or not using it. But I used it to restore my health. And it was a very significant thing for me. And I wanted to share that with you. And before I do, though, as usual, I like to do a little disclaimer. This is definitely not medical advice. I'm not saying you should do what I do, but I'm just sharing it as a case study for information and entertainment purposes only. And if any of the images I use in this presentation belong to you, please feel free to contact me. And what I will do is make sure to do whatever you want, if you want to remove them or change them or get a credit, whatever. Again, this is purely for information purposes. Okay. The question really is, why would I want to share my story? And this is important because when I hit my health crisis, I gained a lot of knowledge and a lot of courage and encouragement from watching other people's videos, primarily on YouTube, dealing with similar health crisis. And because they were brave enough to share all the gory details of their experience and the challenges they faced and what they had to do, it gave me ideas. It gave me encouragement that, geez, if that person could do it, maybe I could. So the reason I'm sharing it is that maybe there's someone out there that went through a similar kind of situation that I experienced, and maybe all they really need is a little bit of encouragement to try a few things. Okay, so it's a payback. So I wanted to share because I gained so much from people who shared. So let's just start with a quick explanation of what keto is. I am not a keto professional, and I'm not pushing this diet, but it's what I am familiar with. And I think that just to clear it up, to make sure we are all on the same page, want to compare a keto diet to the traditional North American diet. The big difference, as you can see in this chart, is that in a keto diet, 75% approximately of your intake is from fats. And the three components of all food, it's either a fat, it's either a protein, which is a building block, and an amino acid, or it's a carb, which is primarily a vegetable product like wheat or fruit or vegetables. Carbs are basically sugar. Okay, so a sugar-based product is the lowest in a keto, as opposed to your typical diet where the carbs, bread, vegetables, fruit, is the majority, over 50%. And so that's the biggest difference, that major reliance on carbs in your typical diet and major reliance on fats in keto. So why is that kind of a trigger? Well, here's the deal. And it took me a while to put this one in my head because it is a complicated concept, and this is the most streamlined graphic that I could find out there There's something called cellular respiration, and it's a huge topic. And if you really want to, fall down a rabbit hole, just go and start watching videos on cellular respiration, and that should keep you occupied for a few months. But for this purposes, I want you to look at the fact that there are 3 basic food components or types. There's proteins, there's glucose, and fats. And those are the 3 types I mentioned earlier. All 3 can be converted into energy. That's that ATP explosion you see here at the end. And this is done through a process called cellular respiration. Every cell must do this. And in order to process a protein, a carbohydrate, or a fat, it has to use oxygen. Okay, so it uses oxygen and it outputs carbon dioxide and water. And these 3 components vary depending on what type of food you're eating. So let's just quickly go through this. If you're eating a protein, it will be converted first into a carbohydrate and then processed. A little note here: the point that the fact that you have to convert a protein first into a carbohydrate requires additional energy. So using proteins as an energy source is the least efficient. The next is glucose, or just think sugar. So glucose is in fact a type of sugar. And when glucose is processed, it takes in oxygen and it outputs carbon dioxide and water, and you get your energy. The thing about glucose is that it's very fast, but it burns up quickly. And this is the process that outputs the most carbon dioxide and water. So you can spot someone who's eating a lot of glucose because they will be puffy, inflammation. And then the third is fats. By definition, a fat is a pre-digested or a component that has gone part way through the cellular respiration process and stored. So fat, as you probably know, is considered a stored energy. So fats take the least amount of oxygen to process, and they output the least amount of carbon dioxide and water because they're already partially processed. So those are the 3. The most expensive is protein. The fastest but most output in terms of carbon dioxide and water is glucose, and then finally there's fats. Understanding this, and you'll understand the idea of why people want to get into something called ketosis. So keto or ketosis is when the body is processing fats. There are only 2 ways that you can actually process this and get energy. One is through carbohydrates or sugars, or proteins that have been converted to sugars, and fat. Here's the catch: you cannot do both at the same time. So your body is either working with fats or working with sugars. The reason this is important is because there's something called autophagy or autophagy, depending on how you want to break up the syllables. Let's go with autophagy. I like that because it's automatic, phagy meaning to purge. So autophagy, the cells get into a purging, and they get rid of any excess foods. They process all the stored fats. When the body goes into autophagy state, you start eating stored fats and cleaning up the host. There's a whole section on this. Again, this is another rabbit hole, but this is why people fast. When you fast and you go into autophagy, or autophagy, your body can actually really heal itself. And this is something I noticed that people do naturally. If you are injured or not feeling well, the last thing you want to do is eat. You want to curl up in a ball, and animals do this. All living things will do this. They'll go into this autophagy state where self-healing. So here's the key. To get to that state, you go through ketosis first. So that's the process. You'll go from sugar burning, you'll go into ketosis, and then you'll go into this healing state. Very important. So let's look at the types of diets you can do. And they'll all be dealing with just balancing those three food types: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. You may have heard the Atkins diet. Notice here the Atkins diet is high on proteins. Why is that important? Because as I mentioned earlier, when you're eating primarily proteins, it's very costly. You will actually burn more energy eating protein than you will fats or carbohydrates. I remember years ago seeing a study that these researchers did. I believe it was in the Barren Strait, and they were looking at some of the indigenous people there, and they wondered why the people would get in canoes, go way out into the Bering Sea, and hunt walrus and drag these huge animals back, risking their lives to get these animals back, and then they would eat the walrus when they could stand on the shore and eat all the fish they wanted. Fish were just there. They just throw a net out and get fish. And the researchers realized that the reason they don't eat the fish as much and they depend on the walrus was because of the fat. They could not survive the winters on a high protein diet. They would perish, right? Because protein takes more energy. So they ate the fat of the walrus, and that's what kept them alive. So the Atkins diet uses that principle that if you eat a high protein, you'll basically lose calorie count and lose weight. The other two down here, the Paleo and Vagan, both have very high carbohydrate, and I didn't really research the things there. I believe the Paleo and Vagan, it's my feeling that they're more philosophical and more value-based. You are eating more carbs to not eat animals. At least that's my impression, that it's really a preference. There is a perceived idea that if you're eating fruits and vegetables, you're eating a, quote, cleaner product. And I kind of grew up with that belief that vegetables somehow were cleaner than fats. And then the American typical diet is very similar to that. It's also very high in carbs. And this brings us finally to the keto diet, which is predominantly fats. Very high in the fats. And then here's a pyramid on it. You can see that the carbs are the smallest portion, proteins are the next, and then fats are the base, living off fats. So why people would do keto? One of the big reasons, and I noticed on the internet, and I'll spare you pictures of people showing off their rock-hard bellies and so on, and ladies in the bikinis, is to lose weight. When you are in a high-carb diet, you will burn sugar but not burn fat. You cannot burn fat, or you burn very little fat when you have sugar in your system. So to burn fat, you switch to a low-carb diet like keto, and you will actually lose weight. This happened to me, but I want to just flag people. Here's my chart here running from 2016 to present. When I started keto in 2021, I did experience a significant weight loss, but notice there is a rebound thing. So my goal is 205. I'm around 205 now today as I speak, but you still have to pay attention to your total calories, and that's really what I'm doing now is just scaling back on the total calories, and my weight is dropping down. But there is this rebound effect, as with all diets. People lose and then rebound. And the bottom line is you still have to keep close attention to what you're eating. There's something called metabolic syndrome, which is a collection of, let's call it disease situations that are clustered under the general term of metabolic syndrome. And they're serious. This is life-threatening. Keto is one of the diets that helps this. It improves all the metrics dealing with this. And again, it's something you can look up on your own. One of the things I noticed when I was doing my research on keto is that a lot of people who have diabetes, both type 1 and 2, particularly 2, use keto to reduce the amount of insulin needed and to basically, in some cases, come out of a type 2 diabetic situation, and as long as they stay on this low-carb diet, they're fine. So a little bit controversial, but very effective, and you'll see lots of people in this area talking about using keto for diabetes. Now we get to something called irritable bowel syndrome, and this is what I had. In 2019, I got food poisoning. It was my fault. I prepared some freshly made noodles, and I didn't pay attention. They had gone bad. I ate them, and I went into severe cramps. My whole bowel system shut down, and I went into what is called an irritable bowel syndrome C, or constipation. My system, as you can see here, the large intestine will compress and contract, as you can see here, abnormal contractions, and nothing moves. Well, I went to emergency. I went to doctors. I had CAT scans, X-rays, cameras down every possible tube. They did everything, and the only thing that was given to me was really some stool softener and time. I panicked. I mean, I've had constipation, but this is class chronic, where it goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I don't know the exact term, but I think it's probably close to 2 months, 2 to 3 months, that my system shut down. And this was due to an initial problem, which was the thing. Now, here's where keto can help, is that when you are eating low carbs, it takes the work off of the large intestines. The large intestine is really there to digest fiber and carbs. That's why you take a probiotic, where you take extra bacteria that live in the large intestine and digest food. If you are having a large intestine problem, by reducing the amount of carbs and fiber will help you. I want to comment here that the only medical advice I was given for this situation was to eat more carbs. I was told to eat more vegetables, which probably wasn't a great idea. But okay, it didn't end there. Because of this long period of time that I was in the IBS-C state, something else happened. Something called SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. These hungry bacteria went up from the large intestine into my small intestine and infected that. So even as my constipation started to clear, I had a high degree of irritation and inflammation in the upper intestine. And it took me a long time to find out what this was. None of the medical practitioners that I saw here, told me about this. I found this by watching videos, and I found a site, I believe it was a medical university, and they ran a seminar on irritable bowel, and one section of the seminar dealt with SIBO. And the case studies that they talked about matched mine, where you have an initial problem, be it an accident, something. In my case, it was the food poisoning, shuts down the large intestine, and bacteria moves upward into the small intestine. That's the good news, is that I found something that kind of explained my situation, but it didn't tell me how to fix it. And what the situation was that my health had deteriorated dramatically, and I was in trouble. And I couldn't get any advice from the doctors. Everything, all I would get was that, oh, you look fine, no problems, they'd x-ray me and everything. All my tests came back normal, but it wasn't normal. I was really sick. And if you've ever, I don't know how to say this without being blunt, if you've ever had severe diarrhea, you don't know what pain is. I could not leave the house for about six months or so. After the constipation cleared up and I went into this stage of IBS, I literally had 15, 20 minutes, maybe an hour of day when I could go do my shopping and get back home. I had to be very careful because you basically lose control. So what happened then was that my condition, because it went on for close to a year, was labeled a chronic condition. And I actually called and got home care to come in, and they basically shrugged their shoulders as if, oh, well, this happens to people and it's a chronic condition and you'll have to live with it. Well, you have to understand that the only solutions for IBS that I saw there were only three. One was to have surgery and to have the bowel bypassed and have a bag. Didn't want that. The other was antibiotics. One doctor who took pity on me and gave me antibiotics, turned out it only made the situation worse. And then finally, there is the diet solution, which ended up working for me. But I was in the state of having a chronic disease, and I then realized that I was a statistic. There is a growing marketplace for irritable bowel globally, and it's considered not a syndrome to be treated and cleared and removed and healed, but is a market. It's viewed as a marketplace, and they put a dollar value on it in terms of how much revenue these companies. So there was no medical solution to cure me, but there were lots of things I could take, products I could take around having it. I was stuck. And that's when I realized that unless I helped myself, I was not going to get any help from the standard medical profession. And then, they were great when I went to emergency. They were great at the family doctor. They were very, very informative, whatever, but they offered no solution. So I identified through watching videos, and particularly the video that I watched from the medical university case studies, that my problem was probably exacerbated by my diet. And here's the breakdown of my macros, up to 2019, where I was your typical North American diet with 50% or more of my diet based on carbs. That was my problem. To zero in, it was the sugar. And you'll notice down here in 2020, the increase in sugar, that was because I was actually told by doctors to eat more carbs, to eat more vegetables, to get more roughage. That increased my sugar content, and really was the worst advice. So the advice they gave me only worsened my situation. I needed to do the reverse. I needed to get rid of the sugar in my system. So how did I do that? Well, I started keto, and I went to the low percentage. There was only one, and I'll mention this for those who may be interested, and this was a tip I got from that medical university workshop that I watched. They identified that you could use surgery to deal with this. You could take antibiotics, both of which really didn't solve the problem. Antibiotics could make it worse. The other option that the nurses identified in this workshop was peppermint oil capsules and diet. And that was a huge bell. So I was able to find these, there's special peppermint oil capsules, the ones that don't dissolve in the stomach. They're encapsulated such that they will get through to the small intestine. There's something in the peppermint oil that the bacteria don't like. So you combine reducing the sugar with I only had to take the peppermint oil for, I think, 2 weeks or something. And the result was almost instantaneous. And you can see here, the green line is my carb consumption here. When I started in 2021, seriously doing the keto and dropped my sugar, you can see it dropping over 2021 into 2022 and still down around 10%. And I took, in the initial phases, the peppermint oil capsules. It was pretty immediate. The response, I noticed improvement almost immediately. Now, here's the trick with taking keto. Here's my current status where I'm, over 50% fats and feeling fantastic, feeling very great, normal. Anyone who's thinking of doing keto, if they think that it might help them, start watching qualified professionals on YouTube. Here's one I've watched many of Dr. Barry's videos. Very informative. He knows what he's talking about. There's a whole community of people who are using keto. Be aware that this is not something you can casually do. People in the family and friends who said, "Oh, geez, Steve, that was really amazing. I'm glad to hear that worked. I'll try it." And none of them succeeded because you can't go into it casually. This is something that, how can I put it? It's work. And when you are faced with not eating bread, for me, that was a crisis. I did not want to let go of my bread and pies and cakes and so on. I liked my treats. And it's emotional on that level. It's psychological. And then when you do begin to get rid of the excess bacteria in your system, they will not go without putting up a fight. So you will probably get something called keto flu. And don't be surprised if your initial experience with keto for the first, I would say, month or two, I'll be perfectly honest with you, it took me probably a year. After a year of being on keto, I no longer thought about bread. I no longer, the first 6 months I made fake breads. I used almond flour. I did all of that because I missed the texture. I missed the sensation of eating toast and those kinds of things. But then after about a year, I didn't, and now 2 years into it, I no longer even think about it. I enjoy my high-fat, low-carb diet and totally enjoy it, and I don't have any thoughts about, desserts. So just to say that, check with these people, and there are support groups if you need that. But you will need help for the first, let's say, 6 months, to be perfectly honest. And the only reason I think I persevered because I needed it so badly, and I was in such bad shape. And I'll repeat, I literally could not leave the house. I missed many family events and activities because I just didn't trust my body anymore. And I was getting depressed. I didn't think there was any way out of this. And to find keto and to get to the point where I now have I actually feel healthier than I have since I was a kid. Since I was a kid, I mean, I feel really, really well. So that's it. If you have any questions, you can just post a message here, and I'll try to reply. If you have other comments, if there's something I've said that you think needs to be adjusted, just let me know, and I'll redo another video with follow-up adjustments. But this is my experience, and it took me from being in a chronic condition with no visible help to feeling fantastic and free. So that's it. So if you want to, give me a hand, go to buymeacoffee.com/SDOliver and buy me a coffee. I still drink coffee with cream, by the way, with fat. And that's pretty much it for today. Thank you very much. And hopefully see you in the next video.